In the previous session, we discussed Plato's contributions to political thoughts, and we also enumerated those that influenced his writings and political thoughts. In this session, we shall be discussing a summary of Plato in the Republic, learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to identify and explain the three classes of human in Plato's Republic. 2. Explain why philosopher kings should not own property. And lastly, explain the possibility of establishing the Republic in our modern world. A summary of Plato in the Republic. The book opens with a nominal attempt to understand the true meaning of justice, from which Plato takes pain to apply the principle of justice in the realm of politics. A tentative conclusion that justice is given everyone his due is then followed by a strong effort to identify the just state. A just state, it is concluded, is one ruled by just individuals. This then sets the additional problem of identifying not only the just state, but also the just individuals. The logic that things are better seen in the larger than in the smaller tilts the search in favor of the state. And so, Plato begins his construction of the ideal state, based on a mystical and metaphysical interpretation of justice and nature. The ideal state can only be fully understood in the context of his theory of forms of idea. For Plato, the visible world is a world of appearances, a mere reflection of reality of the true world. For each of these appearances, that is the mere shadows, there is the ideal form, that is the perfect, which can only be perceived by a few. For instance, there is a real cat, the perfect cat created by God. All the cats we see around us are mere reflections, that is, shadows or imitations of these ideal cats, the perfect cat. From this theory, Plato draws the obvious conclusion that there is also an ideal state or commonwealth, of which the various state forms are mere appearances, imitations, or such of. Only such an ideal state is capable of ensuring stability, true justice, and the happiness of the individual. But this true form can only be perceived by a few, the philosopher, who also by virtue of that fact is capable of understanding the true character of these ideal states. Based on this, Plato concludes that philosophers should be king. See Alan B., 1968. This, of course, is a summary of the main theme of the Republic. Admittedly, no such summary of a text like this is possible in view of the several issues touched by Plato. What we have done is just a presentation of the main concerns of Plato, devoid of as much embellishment as possible. The question that confronts us is, how serious and sincere is Plato? There are two possible angles to this question. The first is to assume that Plato is genuinely concerned with the crisis of the civil state, the popular question of political stability, and the happiness of individuals in organized society. From this angle, Plato's propositions for establishing an ideal state becomes not just a myth, but a practical possibility, which up to the present has eluded the ingenuity of statesmen all around the world. This is not just because the prescriptions themselves are irrelevant and unattainable, but precisely because of the absence of the political will to experiment. Here, we must recall that socialism, as formulated by Karl Marx and Engels, remained at the level of theory until V.I. Lenin and the Bolsheviks provided the political will that gave it a trial in 1917. From this angle, Plato becomes not just the idealist that he's generally acclaimed to be, but a realist as well, believing firmly that his ideal state is a practical reality that society can try at any time. On the other hand, it is not possible that Plato is equally bugged by the low estate of philosophers in general. Their inability to grapple with the intricacies of political power and occupy positions of the highest honor and authority in the state, despite their intellectual superiority. Seen from this second angle, the ambition of Plato in the Republic becomes that of selling the prospects of philosophy and philosophers to the rest of the world. If this is true, then Plato is no more than indeed an idealist, merely daydreaming without any genuine desire to be useful to humanity. This position, of course, will not be consistent with what we know of the political ambition of Plato. The true answer to our question then appears to be that Plato is seriously concerned with finding a lasting solution to the problem of the state and the place of the individual in society. He is serious, he is sincere. Let us now take as much of the rest of the details as we can. Plato's concept of justice and the role of individuals within the state. By his definition, justice does not consist in equality, but in giving everyone his due. Proceeding from this simple logic, that one is truly happy only when engaged in what one has the best aptitude for. Plato classified the citizens into three: the guardian, the soldier, and the worker, each corresponding symbolically to the three sections of the human body: the head as the seat of reason, the chest of valor, and the stomach of appetite, respectively. This classification, based on specialization, presumes a preponderance of mental capability for the guardians, but not strictly in our conception of human knowledge, but by way of great insight in the area of wisdom. This, of course, is the realm of philosophy, which qualifies the best guardian, that is the philosopher, to be king. Others within this class are to function in various capacities as legislators, laying down just laws, and other officers of the state. The soldiers, by specialization, are to assume the role of defending the state. Plato says soldiering is an art and must be a full-time preoccupation. Consequently, the production of the material needs of the state and the burden of maintaining the guardians and the soldiers is to be the direct responsibility of the workers. Each worker is to specialize along his line of competence. Because of this specialization, Plato recognizes the need for trade to enable each individual to acquire what he cannot produce but needs. By and large, the workers form the bulk of the members of the state. We note that this concept of classes is completely different from the Marxian or radical concept of class based on production relation, ownership and non-ownership of the means of production. Property relations within the state. Plato recognizes the place and role of property as the basis of the state, but insists on limiting the right of private property to only the productive class, that is, the workers, who directly engage in production and bear the burden of maintaining the non-productive classes in society. But the guardians and soldiers, the two non-productive classes, must have no right to private property for two different reasons. For the guardians, it is to avoid corrupting their soul, while for the soldiers, it is to stop them from posing a threat to the stability of the state. By these facts, Plato seems to have recognized the corrupting influence of private property in the state and its ability to entice soldiers into politics. To ensure stability too, Plato recommends that the strength of the army must be kept to the barest minimum, because what counts is the quality, not numerical strength. But soldiers must be well trained in military tactics and be physically fit. According to Plato, the guidance are to have small houses and simple food. They are to live in a camp, dining together in companies. They are to have no private property beyond what is absolutely necessary. Gold and silver are to be forbidden. Though not rich, there is no reason why they should not be happy. But the purpose of the city is the good of the whole, not the happiness of the few. See Alan B. 1968 and Sabian and Thorson 1973. Thus, private property is not abolished in Plato's Utopia. It is only restricted. While the soldiers are to live a barrack type of life, with central feeding as in Sparta, the lot of the guardian is a thoroughgoing communism. All this is to obviate the evil influences of private property. Sabian and Thorson 1973 and Havelock E.A. 1963. You can look them up. Plato's philosophy of education. Plato's philosophy of education is closely related to his theory of the state and the essence of justice. Since justice is giving everyone his due, and the object of justice is to ensure a life of contentment based on division of labor, it naturally flows that the system of education must aim at satisfying the basic needs of the state and ensuring social harmony and stability. Secondly, the Platonic system of education is another ideal type. It is neither derived from nor dedicated by the pitfalls of any existing system of education. It is purely an abstraction, an attempt to harmonize the demands of the state with the imperative of its social needs, the institution of virtue in the state. Given this idealism, it should not be a surprise if the system of education conceived by Plato below radically deviates from any known forms of education system. The system is not only elitist, but substantially limited in scope. It is designed to maintain the class structure already established by Plato. The two levels of education are prescribed. For the primary level, which is general education more or less, that is open to all, Plato accepts the syllabus for the Athenian youths as it is, but purged it of all its immoral contents. It is to consist of reading, writing, playing and singing of lyric poetry, rudimentary arithmetic and geometry, music and athletics. This music here includes various forms of arts, letters, music, culture, and philosophy. Then, at the age of 15 or 18, the Athenian youth is to complete his education with 2 additional years of military training. Higher education, however, is the main concern of Plato, and it is to be reserved exclusively for the guidance. It is to consist of long periods of training designed to ensure the production of the best quality of rulers in the state. It is to include 10 years drill in mathematics and 5 years in dialectics, both of which are meant to lead the soul into the world of forms and towards the ideals of the good itself. This good, we must remember, is objectively real to Plato. whether one thinks of it or not, and it is only the philosopher that is capable of perceiving it. Finally, our guardian, now almost 40 years old, proceeds for 15 years of practical internship in the working of the state, a form of industrial training, during which is to acquire practical experience in the lesser positions of the police. At the end, those who excel in thought and action find themselves in the presence of the good itself, and then sit in the legislature to lay down the norms and values of the police. A few comments will be necessary at this point. First, it is doubtful the extent to which Plato wants formal education to serve any class other than the guardians. The purpose of this long period of education is to inculcate habitual virtues of honesty, temperance, courage, endurance, humility, and other moral virtues. Its elitist character lies in its preoccupation with the ruling class, and to a lesser degree, the soldiers who are to receive additional training in military tactics. The interest of the worker is to say that the least is not catered for. Secondly, censorship is a necessary condition for all forms of moral education, even in our time. The criticism leveled against the Homeric epics and Hesiod stories in the Republic by Plato is to ensure moral rectitude. The level of pornography in our times could not have been tolerated in ancient Athens, let alone in Plato's Utopia. The banning of access to gold and silver to the guardians and soldiers is to avoid corrupting their souls. What then is Plato's concept of the state? So far, Plato's view on the origin, character, form, and role of the state have become clear enough for us to summarize below. Plato, like Aristotle, believes that the empirical state evolved naturally in the process of satisfying the biological needs of man from the level of the individual to the family and down to the state. He therefore sees no contradiction between the society and the state. The individuals in society naturally progresses into the state. Plato also sees a state as a republic that has a philosopher, that is, a king presiding over it, and the society has three major classes: the guardian, which is the philosopher king, the soldier, which is the heart, and the workers, which represent the appetite or commoners. On the area of law, Plato was silent on the place of law in his republic. He gave the philosopher kings the right to make laws in the republic. He did not say if they were inferior or superior to the laws. It was in his second thought, the laws, that he presented a government in which the law is supreme, making the ruler and the subject to be subject to it. Hence, Plato said, "Let not Sicily, nor any city anywhere be subject to human masters. Such is my doctrine, but to laws." Subjection is bad, both for masters and subjects, for themselves, for their children's children, and for all their posterity. See Sabian and Thorson, 1973. On justice, according to Convicts, MR 1958, Havelock, EA 1963, and Sabine and Thorson, 1973. Plato defined justice as giving every man his due. For what is due to him is that he should be treated as what he is, in the light of his capacity and his training, while what is due from him is the performance of those tasks which the place accorded him requires. This simply means that society should be divided into three classes: the philosophers, soldiers, and workers. And everybody in the society should perform their functions as either a philosopher, a soldier, or a worker, based on his capacity and learning, and that none should interfere in the realm or sphere of another. This, to Plato, is justice. Summary. In this study session, we learned about the ideal state proposed by Plato. We also learned that the just individual, mystical and metaphysical interpretations of the ideal state, which can only be perceived by few individuals. We also discussed about the classification of individuals given to their faculties and abilities. In this session, we also learned the meaning of justice to mean giving to every individual his due. Again, we stated that only the workers are permitted and qualified to own property in the Republic to avoid corruption and diversion of state funds. Furthermore, we said that in the Plato's Republic, without elongated type of education, one is disqualified from leadership. And lastly, we learned that only the courageous can become soldiers in the Republic proposed by Plato. End of study session 2, module 2. Thank you for listening.